I'm Ileana, 32, female, and my family told me a vacation was too expensive to include me, only for me to find them vacationing at the luxury villa I paid for. It was a discovery that felt less like a simple lie and more like a carefully orchestrated betrayal, one that unraveled years of a dynamic I had mistakenly called love. The final, satisfying confrontation was not an act of revenge, but an act of self-preservation. The phone call that started it all was deceptively simple, cushioned in the familiar, warm tones of my mother's voice. I was at my desk, wrapping up a long day of coding, the soft glow of my dual monitors painting stripes across my face. My phone buzzed, displaying a picture of my mom, Sharon, smiling cheerfully. I picked it up, happy for the distraction. "Hi, Mom, what's up?" "Oh, hi, honey," she began, her voice a little too bright. "Just calling to check in. How's work?" We went through the usual pleasantries. I told her about the project I was leading, and she told me about her garden club. It was all perfectly normal, which, in hindsight, was the most chilling part. Then, she got to the real reason for her call. "So," she said, a carefully placed sigh in her voice, "your father and I were thinking, we haven't had a proper family trip in ages, just something small. We were looking at a little getaway next month." My heart lifted. A family trip sounded wonderful. With my demanding job, I rarely took time off, and the thought of spending a week with my parents and my younger sister, Chloe, felt like a breath of fresh air. "That sounds amazing, Mom. Where are you thinking of going?" This is where the performance truly began. "Well, that's the thing, sweetie. It's all so expensive these days. Your father's hours got cut back a little, and Chloe, well, being an influencer is more of a passion than a paycheck right now." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "We just crunched the numbers, and with flights and everything, it's just too expensive to include you this year. We feel awful about it." The words stung, a quick, sharp jab of disappointment, but it was the logic that confused me. "Too expensive to include me? Mom, I can pay for my own flight. I can contribute to the food. That's not an issue." "No, Ileana, we couldn't ask you to do that," she said, her voice dripping with false martyrdom. "It wouldn't be fair. It's supposed to be a family trip, and we should be able to treat our kids. If we can't afford to treat everyone, then it's just complicated. We found a really cheap all-inclusive package just for the three of us. It's the only way we can make it work. Please don't be upset." I felt a familiar wave of resignation wash over me. This was the family script. I was the responsible, successful older sister, the one who had her life together. My sister, Chloe, was the free-spirited dreamer, and my parents were her loyal patrons, facilitating her whims while I was treated like a capable, but separate entity. I was the family ATM, the reliable backup plan, but rarely was I just part of the fun. This dynamic had been carved in stone for years. I remember when Chloe decided she wanted to be a travel influencer 2 years ago. It was an idea born from scrolling through Instagram, with no business plan or savings to back it up. My parents held a family meeting where they laid out Chloe's vision. "She just needs a little seed money," my dad, David, had said, avoiding my eyes and stirring his coffee. "A good camera, a laptop for editing, a few sponsored outfits to get started." "And where is this seed money coming from?" I had asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, we thought," my mom began, smiling that placating smile of hers. "You're doing so well, Ileana. It would be such a wonderful way to support your sister's dream." It wasn't a request, it was an expectation. I ended up transferring $5,000 to Chloe's account. I saw the new camera and laptop appear on her social media, followed by a flurry of posts from local cafes. The travel part never quite materialized beyond a weekend trip to a nearby city, which I also ended up funding. The influencer career fizzled out within 6 months, but the equipment remained, and the money was never mentioned again. Then there was the time my parents' roof started leaking. They'd ignored a small stain for months until it became a deluge during a spring storm. They called me in a panic, not to ask for advice, but to ask for the $20,000 the repair was going to cost. They dipped into their emergency savings to help Chloe pay her rent after she'd quit another part-time job. "We're just in a tight spot," my father had mumbled over the phone, the shame in his voice barely masking the entitlement. I paid the contractors directly. The thank you I received was a brief, "Oh, you're a lifesaver, honey," from my mom before she immediately changed the subject to Chloe's latest drama. This pattern of financial expectation and emotional distance was the backdrop to my life. I was the family's safety net, but I was never allowed to forget that Chloe was their heart. She was the one they worried about, fussed over, and celebrated. I was the one they called when the bill came due. This was why, about a year ago, I did something for myself that I hoped would also be for them. I bought a vacation property. It wasn't some spontaneous purchase. It was the result of years of disciplined saving and smart investing. I found a beautiful, 3-bedroom villa in a quiet coastal town, a place with a sprawling balcony overlooking the ocean. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the pressures of work. When I told my family, their reactions were mixed. Chloe's eyes widened with undisguised envy. "Wow," she'd breathed. "You can afford that?" My dad looked uncomfortable, as he always did when confronted with the disparity in our financial situations. But my mom, Sharon, saw an opportunity. "Oh, Ileana, that's wonderful," she had gushed, hugging me tightly. "A family beach house, we can all go there for holidays, it will be so lovely." I had been naive. I wanted to believe her. I wanted this villa to be a bridge, a place where we could finally connect as a family of equals. I made a colossal mistake born of that hope. I gave them a key. "For emergencies," I'd said, "and you guys can use it a couple of times a year. Just coordinate with me first so we don't double book." They had used it once for a weekend, and I'd joined them. It was pleasant, but I still felt like a host in my own home, constantly fetching things and making sure everyone was comfortable. Now, sitting in my office chair, the echo of my mom's words, "Too expensive to include you," bounced around in my head. It didn't make sense. Why would they book a cheap, all-inclusive resort when my beautiful, free villa was sitting empty? "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "I understand. I hope you three have a wonderful time." "Oh, we will, sweetie. We'll miss you, though," she chirped, the lie now sounding shrill and obvious. "We'll bring you back a souvenir." We hung up and I stared at the blank screen of my monitor. The disappointment was a heavy weight in my chest. It wasn't about the money or even the vacation itself. It was the casual, easy way they excluded me. It was the feeling of being held at arm's length by the very people who were supposed to hold me closest. I sighed, pushed the feeling down, and turned back to my code. I told myself it was just another small slight, another paper cut in a long history of them. I had no idea it was a gaping wound, and I was about to see the proof. 2 weeks passed. The sting of my mother's phone call had dulled to a low, persistent ache. I threw myself into work, logging long hours and taking on extra tasks to keep my mind occupied. I told myself I wasn't hurt, that I was a busy, independent woman who didn't need a family vacation. But in the quiet moments of the evening, a profound loneliness would creep in. I'd scroll through my phone, looking at pictures of other families, of friends laughing together, and wonder what I had done wrong to be so disconnected from my own. It was a Tuesday night, just after 9 o'clock. I had just finished a microwaved dinner and was lounging on my sofa, aimlessly scrolling through social media. It was a mindless habit, a way to numb the silence of my apartment. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just flicking past photos of weddings, babies, and sunset dinners. Then I saw it. It wasn't on Chloe's feed, or my mom's, or my dad's. They had been suspiciously quiet online, which I'd attributed to them being on their cheap vacation. The photo was posted by one of Chloe's friends, a girl named Madison whom I'd met a few times. The picture was bright and sun-drenched. In it, my mom, my dad, and Chloe were standing on a balcony, clinking glasses filled with what looked like expensive cocktails. They were all grinning from ear to ear, tanned and relaxed. Behind them, the turquoise ocean stretched out to the horizon. My finger froze on the screen. There was something familiar about the scene. My eyes narrowed and I zoomed in. I looked past their smiling faces to the details in the background. The distinctive white wicker furniture with the navy blue cushions. The terracotta tiles on the floor, one of which I knew had a small, star-shaped crack near the sliding glass door. The potted palm tree in the corner that I had bought at a local nursery. My breath caught in my throat. My heart started to pound, a frantic, sickening rhythm against my ribs. It was my balcony. They were at my villa. The caption on the photo, posted by Madison, read, "Living the dream, so happy I could join the fam for a few days at their stunning beach house. Chloe, your parents are the best." Their beach house. The words swam before my eye. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to put my phone down on the cushion beside me. It couldn't be. There had to be some mistake. Maybe it was a different villa that just looked uncannily similar. But I knew it wasn't. I knew every detail of that place. I had picked out the furniture, haggled for the pot the palm tree sat in, and felt the specific warmth of those terracotta tiles on my bare feet. My mind raced, replaying the phone call with my mother. Her saccharine voice, the carefully crafted lies, "It's just too expensive to include you this year. We found a really cheap all-inclusive package." The words were a cruel joke, a taunt. They hadn't gone to a cheap resort. They had gone to my luxurious 5-star villa, the one I owned, the one I paid the mortgage and the property taxes and the utilities for. And they had done it without me. They had not only excluded me, but had used my own success, my own generosity, as the vehicle for their secret vacation. A cold, hard anger began to bloom in my chest, pushing out the shock and hurt. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a simple oversight. This was a deliberate, calculated act of deception. They had lied to my face to get what they wanted, a free luxury holiday without the inconvenient presence of the person who was funding it. They hadn't just excluded me, they had stolen from me. They had stolen my peace of mind, my trust, and the use of my home. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone again. I navigated to Chloe's profile. It was private, a change she must have made recently, but her profile picture was public. It was a new one. It showed her sitting on the edge of the infinity pool at my villa, her back to the camera, looking out at the sunset. The image was beautifully composed, a perfect shot for an aspiring influencer, and it was a dagger in my heart. She was using my home as a prop for the very career I had funded, on a trip I was forbidden from attending. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. They weren't just on vacation, they were hosting guests. Madison's caption said she had joined the fam. So they were entertaining people, passing my home off as their own, while I sat 1,000 miles away eating a sad, solitary dinner. The anger wasn't hot and explosive. It was chillingly cold. It settled deep in my bones, clarifying everything. The years of being the family bank, the endless loans that were never repaid, the casual disregard for my feelings, it all coalesced into this one unforgivable act. This was the culmination of every slight, every time I felt more like a utility than a daughter or a sister. I stood up and began to pace my living room, the polished hardwood floors cool beneath my feet. My mind was whirring, no longer clouded by hurt or confusion. The path forward was suddenly, blindingly clear. I would not call. I would not send an angry text. Words were their weapon of choice. They could twist them, turn them, and use them to gaslight me into believing I was the one who was overreacting. No, I wasn't going to play their game. I was going to walk onto the board and flip it over. The hours that followed the discovery were a blur of cold fury and methodical planning. The initial shock had crystallized into a single, unshakable resolve. For years, I had accepted their behavior. I had rationalized it, telling myself that all families were complicated, that this was just their way. I had paid their bills, funded their whims, and absorbed their emotional neglect, all in the name of keeping the peace. But peace was just another word for my silence. As I paced my apartment, my phone felt like a dead weight in my hand. I thought about calling my mom, about demanding an explanation. What would she say? I could already hear it. "Oh, honey, it was a last-minute change of plans. The resort was overbooked, and we didn't want to bother you. We were going to tell you." The lies would be immediate, seamless, and designed to make me feel guilty for being angry. Then I considered texting Chloe. Her response would likely be even worse. "OMG, Ileana, you're overreacting. It's not a big deal. Why do you always have to make everything about you?" She had a black belt in deflection and a PhD in making me feel like the villain for having boundaries. No, communication was pointless. It would only lead to more gaslighting and manipulation. They had made their choice when they packed their bags and used my key to enter my home under false pretenses. Now, I would make mine. I stopped pacing and stood in the middle of my living room. The decision settled over me not with a crash, but with a profound, unnerving calm. I was going to go there. I wasn't going to warn them. I was going to show up and confront them in the middle of their stolen paradise. The idea was so audacious, so contrary to my usual conflict-avoidant nature, that it felt liberating. For the first time, I wasn't going to absorb the blow. I was going to return it. I Ed over to my laptop, my movements precise and deliberate. I opened a travel website, the brightly colored logos a stark contrast to my grim mood. I typed in the name of the small coastal airport nearest to my villa. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for the earliest possible flight. There was one. It left at 6:15 a.m. the next morning. It was expensive, a last-minute fare that would normally make me hesitate. Tonight, I clicked purchase without a second thought. The irony was not lost on me. I was paying a premium to fly to my own house to kick out the family who claimed they couldn't afford for me to join them. The confirmation email dinged in my inbox. Booking confirmed, New York to Coastal Airport. It looked so official, so final. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a sense of righteousness. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I went into my bedroom and pulled a small carry-on suitcase from the top of my closet. "What do you pack for a trip like this?" I paused, my hand hovering over my drawers. I wasn't going on vacation. I was going to war. I packed a few simple, functional outfits, toiletries, my laptop, and a charger. As I zipped the bag shut, I felt a profound sense of detachment, as if I were watching someone else go through these motions. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a slideshow of past hurts. I remembered being a teenager, saving up my own money from a part-time job to buy a concert ticket, only to have my mom make me give it to Chloe because her friends were going and she would have felt left out. "You understand, honey," my mom had said. "You're the mature one." I remembered my college graduation. My parents were there, but they seemed distracted, taking calls from Chloe, who was having a meltdown over a fight with her boyfriend. They left the celebratory dinner early to go comfort her. I sat there with my cap and gown, feeling like an afterthought on one of the most important days of my life. Each memory was a brick in the wall that now stood between me and them. The villa was just the final, most ostentatious brick. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for, and they had treated it, and by extension me, with the utmost disrespect. They didn't see the years of hard work, the sacrifices, the late nights I'd spent building my career. They just saw a resource to be exploited. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, I got out of bed. I showered, the hot water doing little to warm the icy resolve in my veins. I dressed, grabbed my bag, and called a car to the airport. In the quiet darkness of the backseat, I looked out at the sleeping city. I was leaving one life behind and heading toward an unknown future. I knew, with absolute certainty, that after today, my family would never be the same. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The relationship I had been trying so hard to preserve wasn't real. It was a one-sided contract, and I was finally ready to declare it void. The airport at 5 a.m. is a world unto itself, a strange limbo of fluorescent lights, hushed announcements, and the smell of stale coffee. It felt like the perfect setting for my mission, impersonal, transitional, and filled with people heading toward destinations that were, unlike mine, likely filled with joy and anticipation. I moved through the security line like an automaton, my carry-on gliding behind me, my face a mask of neutrality. Inside, my stomach was a knot of dread and determination. Once I was on the plane, I found my window seat and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. As the plane taxied and then ascended, leaving the sprawling lights of the city behind, I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was literally rising above the life I had known, heading into uncharted territory. The flight was just over 2 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. I didn't read or watch a movie. I just sat and thought, letting the memories I had suppressed for years surface. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the value they placed on me versus the value they placed on Chloe. I remembered Christmases where Chloe's pile of gifts would dwarf mine. My gifts were practical, sensible things, a new set of pans, a gift certificate for a bookstore. Chloe's were extravagant and trendy, designer bags, the latest electronics, things my parents couldn't really afford. Chloe just gets so excited about presents, my mom would explain, as if my own quiet gratitude was a character flaw. You're so much easier to please, Ileana. What she meant was that I never complained. I thought about the villa. The day I closed on it was one of the proudest moments of my life. It was tangible proof of my success, a place of peace I had created for myself. When I called my parents to share the news, their excitement had felt thin. "That's nice, dear," my dad had said, his voice distant. "Just be careful with your moan." My mom was more effusive, but her enthusiasm was all directed toward how the family could use it. There was no, "Congratulations, Ileana, you worked so hard for this." It was an immediate pivot to, "When can we visit?" My naive hope that the villa would be a place of connection had been a fantasy. For them, it wasn't a home, it was a hotel. A free, luxury hotel with a permanent concierge, me. The plane began its descent, and the turquoise water and white sand beaches of the coast came into view. My heart rate quickened. This was it. This was real. After landing at the small, breezy airport, I walked to the rental car counter. The woman behind the desk was cheerful and tan. "Here for a vacation?" she asked with a wide smile. "Something like that," I replied, my voice tight. I took the keys to a nondescript sedan and drove out of the parking lot, the unfamiliar roads feeling strange under the tires. I didn't need GPS. I knew the way to my villa by heart. As I drove, the scenery became more beautiful, palm trees swaying, the sun glinting off the water. It was paradise. A paradise that had been corrupted by my family's lies. With each mile that passed, my resolve hardened. Any lingering doubts, any whispers in my mind telling me I was being too harsh, were silenced by the memory of Chloe's Instagram picture and Madison's cheerful caption. Their stunning beach house. I decided not to drive directly to the villa. I parked the car on a side street 2 blocks away, tucked behind a thick grove of bougainvillea. I didn't want them to have any warning. No seeing a strange car in the driveway, no time to concoct a story. I got out of the car and the warm, humid air hit me like a blanket. I could smell the salt from the ocean. I started walking. My footsteps on the pavement sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet, sun-drenched street. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears. As I rounded the final corner, my house came into view. It looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful and serene, but it felt alien. There were colorful beach towels draped over the balcony railing, towels I had never seen before. Through the large front window, I could see movement. And then I heard it. The faint sound of music and laughter, a carefree sound that made my blood run cold. I walked up the stone path to my front door, my hand closing around the key in my pocket. The cool metal was a comforting, solid presence. This was my house, my rules. The party was over. I stood before my own front door for a long moment, listening. The laughter from inside grew louder, punctuated by the upbeat tempo of a pop song. It was the sound of a casual, carefree party, a sound that felt like a personal insult. They were not just staying here, they were reveling in their deception, filling my sanctuary with a thoughtless joy that was stolen at my expense. My hand was steady as I slipped the key into the lock. I had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided confrontation, the one who would swallow her hurt to maintain a fragile peace. That person was gone. The click of the lock turning was the sound of a new chapter beginning. I pushed the door open silently and stepped inside. The cool air of the foyer washed over me. I took off my shoes, a force of habit, and placed them neatly by the door. The music was louder now. It was coming from the great room, which opened onto the back patio and the pool. I walked slowly, my bare feet making no sound on the tiled floor. I paused at the edge of the archway that led into the living area and took in the scene. My father, David, was lounging on my cream-colored sofa, a bottle of beer in his hand, chuckling at something on the television. My mother, Sharon, was arranging a platter of cheese and fruit on the kitchen island, my kitchen island. And there, in the center of it all, was my sister, Chloe. She was with her friend, Madison, taking selfies near the sliding glass door that led to the pool, striking exaggerated poses and laughing. They were so comfortable, so completely at ease in my home, that a fresh wave of ice-cold rage washed over me. They looked up as I stepped fully into the room, my shadow falling across the sunlit floor. The music was still playing, but it felt like the entire world had gone silent. My father's smile froze on his face. The beer bottle paused halfway to his lips. My mother's hands stilled over the cheese platter, her eyes widening in disbelief. Madison just looked confused, her phone held awkwardly in midair. But it was Chloe's reaction that I will never forget. Her perfectly made-up face, which had been stretched into a wide smile for the camera, collapsed into a mask of pure shock. Her jaw literally dropped. "Ileana," she gasped, her voice a strangled whisper. "What are you doing here?" I felt a slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile that held all the weight of the years of disappointment, all the anger from the past 48 hours. I took another step into the room, letting my gaze sweep over each of their stunned faces. "Checking in," I said, my voice calm and even, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I looked directly at Chloe, then at my mother, and then my father. I let the silence stretch, enjoying the palpable panic that was beginning to ripple through the room. Then, I delivered the line I had been rehearsing in my head for the entire journey. "You've got 10 minutes to get out." The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if I had detonated a bomb. My father slowly sat up, placing his beer on the coffee table with a clink. My mother stared at me, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words but couldn't. Chloe was the first to recover. Her shock quickly morphed into indignation. "Get out! What are you talking about? This is crazy." "Is it?" I asked, my voice still dangerously quiet. "I don't think it's crazy. I think what's crazy is telling me a family vacation is too expensive to include me and then having that vacation in my house. My house that I paid for." I looked over at Madison, who was now inching towards the door, her eyes wide with alarm. "Madison, it was lovely to see you, but the party's over. You should probably call a cab." Madison didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her purse, mumbled a panicked, I should go, and practically fled, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Now it was just the four of us, the real family. "Ileana, honey, you don't understand," my mother started, her voice taking on that familiar, placating tone. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, I think it is exactly what it looks like," I countered, taking another step closer. "It looks like you lied to me. It looks like you used my home without my permission. And it looks like you are all trespassing." "Trespassing?" my father sputtered, finding his voice at last. "Don't be ridiculous, Ileana. We're your family." "My family?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "My family wouldn't lie to my face and treat me like a bank. My family wouldn't exclude me from a trip and then use my own property to do it. So, no, right now, you are just 3 people who have overstayed their non-existent welcome." I walked over to the collection of designer shopping bags sitting by the door, Chloe's, no doubt, and picked one up. I walked it to the front door and placed it on the porch. Then I turned back to them. 10 minutes, I repeated, my voice like steel. "The clock started when I walked in. You've got about 8 minutes left." The stunned silence that had followed my ultimatum quickly shattered into a cacophony of panicked excuses and indignant protests. They stared at me as if I had grown a second head, their minds unable to process this new version of Ileana, the one who wasn't quietly accepting their disrespect. "Ileana, stop this nonsense right now," my mother, Sharon, said, her voice rising in pitch. She had abandoned the cheese platter and was now advancing on me, her hands on her hips. "You are being hysterical. We were going to invite you." "When?" I asked, my voice flat and unmoved. "After you had your fun? After Chloe got all her pictures for her social media? Were you going to send me a postcard from my own house?" "This is so unfair," Chloe cried out, tears welling in her eyes. It was her signature move, the one she used to disarm any conflict and paint herself as the victim. "You're ruining everything. We were having a nice time." "You were having a nice time on my dime and behind my back," I retorted, refusing to be swayed by her tears. "The fact that you think you're entitled to that is the whole problem." I started walking through the living room, picking up their scattered belongings, a sun hat here, a magazine there, and dropping them into a pile near the front door. My actions were calm and methodical, which seemed to unnerve them more than shouting would have. My father, David, finally stood up, adopting his head of the household posture, which looked ridiculous given the circumstances. "Now, that's enough, Ileana. Let's all just sit down and talk about this like reasonable adults." "I am being a reasonable adult," I said, turning to face him. "A reasonable adult who has discovered her family has been lying to her and taking advantage of her generosity. The time for talking was before you decided to deceive me. The time now is for you to pack your bags." I went into the guest bedroom where my parents were staying. Their suitcases were open on the floor, clothes spilling out. Without hesitation, I started grabbing their things, shirts, pants, toiletries, and stuffing them unceremoniously into the bags. My mother followed me, her voice now pleading. "Ileana, please, think about what you're doing. Where will we go? We don't have a hotel booked. Our flight isn't for 3 more days." The flicker of a thought crossed my mind. What would they do? They were 1,000 miles from home with no accommodations. For a split second, the old, responsible Ileana felt a pang of guilt. Then I remembered the cold, calculated nature of their lie. They had created this situation. They had banked on my ignorance. It was not my job to solve the problems born from their own deceit. "That sounds like a you problem, Mom," I said, zipping up one of the suitcases with a decisive tug. I dragged it out into the hallway. "You had plenty of time to think about logistics when you were planning your secret trip. You can figure this out. There's an app for booking hotels. I'm sure Chloe has it on her phone." Chloe, who had been watching from the doorway with a horrified expression, let out a sob. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. You're so selfish." The accusation was so absurd, so utterly backward, that I couldn't help but laugh. It was a sharp, humorless sound. "Selfish? I paid for your influencer career. I paid to fix this family's financial messes. I bought this house, a place you felt entitled to use as your own private resort. And I'm the selfish one? The delusion is astounding, Chloe. Truly." I left them to their sputtering and went to the master bedroom, my bedroom, which Chloe had commandeered. Her clothes were strewn everywhere, makeup was all over the vanity, and the air smelled of her strong perfume. The sheer disrespect of it fueled my resolve. I found her suitcase, a trendy pink roller bag, and began shoving her things into it with a vengeance. They seemed to finally realize I was not bluffing. A frantic energy filled the house as they scrambled to pack. There were muttered curses from my father, dramatic sighs from my mother, and continuous hiccuping sobs from Chloe. I ignored it all. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a trash bag, and began clearing away the remnants of their party, the cheese platter, the empty bottles, the used glasses. I was erasing them from my space. Within 20 minutes, they were standing by the front door with their luggage, looking defeated and furious. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother's face was a mask of cold anger. Chloe's was tear-streaked and blotchy. "I have the number for a local taxi service if you need it," I said, holding out a piece of paper. My father snatched it from my hand without a word. "I hope you're happy, Ileana," my mother said, her voice dripping with venom. "You've torn this family apart." "No," I replied, my voice steady and clear. "I didn't tear it apart. I just turned on the lights and saw it was already broken." I stood in the doorway and watched them wheel their suitcases down the stone path. I watched them huddle on the curb, my father on the phone, likely trying to find a last-minute, overpriced hotel room. I felt a strange mix of emotions, a deep, profound sadness for the family I wished I had, but also a fierce, liberating sense of relief. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a blanket. It was over. The confrontation was done, but the real work of figuring out what came next was just beginning. The silence that descended upon the villa after my family left was absolute. For the first few moments, it was a relief, a balm on my frayed nerves. But as the minutes stretched on, the silence grew heavy, filled with the ghosts of the argument, the echoes of their angry words. The house, my sanctuary, felt tainted. I walked from room to room, surveying the aftermath. There were damp towels on the bathroom floors, half-empty water bottles on nightstands, and a general feeling of chaotic occupation. It was as if their disrespect had seeped into the very walls. So I began to clean. It started with me just gathering the trash they'd left behind, but it quickly became a meticulous, top-to-bottom purge. I stripped the beds, gathering the sheets they had slept in. I wiped down every counter they had touched. I opened all the windows, letting the fresh, salty ocean breeze chase away the stale energy of their presence. It was a ritual. With every surface I scrubbed, every item I put back in its rightful place, I felt like I was reclaiming not just my home, but my life. I was washing away their influence, cleansing my space of their deceit. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, began to buzz incessantly. A barrage of texts and calls. First from my mother, then my father, then Chloe. The messages ranged from furious to pleading. From Mom, "I cannot believe you would be so cruel. You threw your own family out on the street." From Dad, "You need to call me right now, Ileana. This has gone too far." From Chloe, "I hate you. You've ruined everything and you're a horrible sister." I read the messages, and for the first time, they didn't hurt. The words were just noise, the desperate flailing of people who had lost control of the narrative. I turned my phone off and left it on the counter. I didn't need to hear any more. I had heard enough for a L. Lifetime. I spent the next 2 days at the villa alone. I didn't turn on the television or listen to music. I just existed in the quiet. I sat on my balcony, the same balcony from the pictures, and watched the waves roll in. I swam in my pool. I walked along the beach at sunrise. And with each passing hour, the house started to feel like mine again. The anger began to subside, replaced by a quiet, somber clarity. My mother was wrong. I hadn't torn the family apart. It was a house of cards, built on a foundation of unspoken rules. Ileana pays, Chloe plays, Mom and Dad enable. I hadn't torn it down. I had simply refused to be the card at the bottom anymore, and the whole structure had collapsed. On the third day, the day they were originally scheduled to fly home, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a locksmith. I had a new, high-security lock system installed on all the doors. The old keys, including the one my parents had, were now useless. The second call was to a local property management company. I arranged for them to handle check-ins and maintenance going forward. I would never again leave a key under the mat, figuratively or literally. When I flew home, I felt different. Lighter. The knot of resentment that I had carried in my stomach for years was gone. In its place was a peaceful, if lonely, resolve. Weeks have passed since then. I have not spoken to my parents or my sister. I turned my phone back on, but I have not responded to their messages. I know that for any real reconciliation to happen, it would require them to take genuine responsibility for their actions. It would require a deep, honest apology, not for getting caught, but for the betrayal itself. I don't expect to receive one anytime soon. The truth is, I'm grieving. I'm grieving the family I thought I had, the one I kept trying to build and buy my way into, but I am no longer willing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. My resolution is not about revenge, it's about self-worth. It's about understanding that I deserve to be in my own life, not just as a supporting character or a financial resource, but as the main character. I am no longer their safety net. I am my own. The villa is clean, the locks are changed, and for the first time in a long time, I feel truly at home in my own life. So, I leave it to you. Was I too harsh? Should I have found a different way to handle it? Sat down for that reasonable talk my father wanted? Or was this the only way to make them finally understand the consequences of their actions? What would you have done if the people who were supposed to love you most treated your life like a free hotel?